So why do so many people set New Year's resolution goals and so many people fail? What is it? And what we're going to do in today's podcast is really dive into the root causes of failure and see if we can uncover some mistakes that people make and try and do the opposite of that to help ensure success moving forward. So instead of giving y'all hype and piss and vinegar and saying, oh, rah, you can do it, just be positive, all that BS, I want to dissect the root causes of failure. And by studying the failure, we can learn what not to do moving forward.
Welcome to the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast with Lee Hayward and Jeff Samataro. Since 1997, Lee Hayward's Total Fitness Bodybuilding has been online helping guys to build muscle, lose fat, and become the best version of themselves. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with real-world practical fitness and nutrition advice to look your best, improve your health, and feel confident in your own skin so you can live life to the fullest without having your body holding you back from doing the things you want to do. So if you're ready to get started, let's jump into the show.
Welcome to the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast. My name is Lee Hayward, and this is our first podcast of 2025. Brand new year, brand new you, brand new start. Like the whole New Year's resolutions. It starts every year, the same old fiasco. And what I want to do in today's podcast is do a bit of a summary of 2024, highlighting some of my own personal fitness accomplishments and also, I guess, some fitness setbacks that I went through, because this is something I like to do at the end of every year, is kind of do a recap of my personal fitness and analyze what I'd like to focus on improving in the upcoming year. And I'd also like to give you some suggestions on how you can optimize your own health and fitness moving into 2025 and do so in a more productive way. Because the truth is, when New Year's rolls around, about 1 out of every 2 people are going to set a New Year's resolution goal. And unfortunately, most of those New Year's resolution goals go unfulfilled. Like at the end of next year, this time next year, when we're having the same conversation again, over 90% of the last year's New Year's resolution goals are going to be unfulfilled. They're going to be failures. Only about 8% are actually going to come to fruition. So why do so many people set New Year's resolution goals and so many people fail? What is it? And what we're going to do in today's podcast is really dive into the root causes of failure and see if we can uncover some mistakes that people make and try and do the opposite of that to help ensure success moving forward. So instead of giving y'all hype and piss and vinegar and saying, oh, rah, you can do it, just be positive, all that BS, I want to dissect the root causes of failure. And by studying the failure, we can learn what not to do moving forward. All right, so it's a kind of a reverse psychology approach to this, but I think you'll find it very helpful. Now, before we get into that, I want to do a recap of my own personal fitness journey. And right here, this is my year in sport as per my records on Strava. If you're not familiar with Strava, that is a app that a lot of endurance athletes use for tracking their workouts and their fitness. And I use it for tracking primarily my cycling workouts, but I also log my strength training workouts in there as well. And over this past year, I had 300 days of activity. So 300 days of exercise in 2024, which is actually down from what I achieved in 2023. I had in total distance, 8,914 kilometers. That was primarily cycling. I mean, cycling is my number one activity that I've done over the past year and have for the last several years. So cycling followed by weight training. That's how I basically structure my workout. Cycling is my number one activity now, and I compete in cycling races, but I supplement that with weight training in the gym. And then in addition to that, I do some other, like some walking and jogging and simple stuff like that. But cycling and strength training are my two big ones. And my total volume for this past year has been down significantly. My total time training has been down significantly. And I just want to acknowledge that because I had some setbacks over the past year, like in 2024. One, in the spring of the year, I had COVID. I mean, that hit me really hard. It took about 6 weeks before I could get back to training again. It really zapped my strength and energy and just took the good out of me. And it was a whole reset because I was on a roll before I got COVID. And then once I had it, it was just like, man, boom, just knocked me right back to square one. And I had to focus on rebuilding my strength and fitness and stamina all over again. So that was a big setback for me in terms of my progress. Another one is I also had carpal tunnel syndrome surgery in November. So that was a bit of a setback. So over the fall now, I haven't been as active with strength training or with cycling because I was recovering from carpal tunnel. So those were a few things that I had to deal with. And because of that, my total volume for the year has been down significantly over the past year. But you know what? That's okay. I'm not beating myself up over that because everyone goes through ups and downs and setbacks. And we have to learn to be okay with good enough. Like you've probably heard me say, we want to be good enough and good enough consistently. And that's where this whole idea really comes into play. And not just getting upset if we're not hitting personal bests, because the reality is we're not always going to hit it out of the park. We're not always going to hit a personal best. There's going to be a lot of times where we are less than our best, and you have to be okay with that and keep moving forward. And that is a challenge for a lot of people. And in this podcast, we're going to break down the top 5 reasons why people fail to achieve their New Year's resolution goals. Now, this applies to pretty much any type of goal you're setting for yourself, whether it is a fitness goal, whether it is a financial goal, a career goal, a personal development goal, or whatever. But for the purpose of the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast, we're going to gear it primarily towards fitness, but realize that the same principles that we're covering here could apply in other areas of personal development or other areas of goal setting that you're working towards. So keep that in the back of your mind. Like the carryover from fitness to real life situations is huge. And you find that the skills you develop in building your body also carry over to building a business or building a career or improving in other areas of your life. The principles are the same in multiple areas. It's just the tactics and what you actually do vary depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. So keep that in mind. That's a very important thing to notice. So the 2 big mistakes that I want to cover right off the bat are the first one, not starting or procrastinating with starting, and number 2, not finishing. So we can basically sum up failure into those 2 things right there. Either you don't start or you procrastinate with starting. And when you do finally get started, you don't finish, right? That's the biggest reasons for failure. And we're going to break it down in a lot more detail. But the bottom line, we need to focus on just getting that ball rolling, get the momentum moving, start taking action as soon as possible and not waiting for the perfect time, not getting hung up with, oh, I'll wait till I'm not busy or I'll wait till the new year. That was a big one. Like all fall when we're going through the holiday season, right on through Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays and all that. So many people were saying, hey, I'm too busy now. It's not the right time. It's the holidays. I'll start in the new year. And now that the new year is here, sure, some people are starting, but there's still a lot of people are coming up with excuses like, oh, it's too busy. It's not the right time. It's the winter time. It's too cold. It's too whatever. It's in the summertime. It's too hot. It's like every excuse you can think of. And realize that it's never going to be perfect. It never is. You're always going to have a reason or an excuse for why not to do something. You have to find a way to do it anyway. Now, one of the reasons why a lot of people procrastinate in starting or just don't get started is because they make the goal or whatever it is they're trying to achieve too big in their mind. And I'll give you an example of this. For those of you who are familiar with my story, like I'm a former competitive bodybuilder. I've been competing in bodybuilding since I was a senior in high school. So I did my very first show at 17 years old, and I competed pretty much every year right up until I was 31. And after I stopped competing in bodybuilding and I became a father, I got the quote unquote dad bod, right? Hence the shirt, right? The dad bod. That is a real thing. And I went through a process of knowing what to do, but not doing what I needed to do. Because in the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, if I go back on that extreme bodybuilding cutting diet like I used to do when I was a competitor, right? 6 days a week in the gym, 2 hours of cardio a day, suffering it out with the boiled chicken and broccoli diet. I mean, sure, I could get in shape, and I did it for years. That was my go-to cutting diet for years as a competitive bodybuilder. That's what I would do for months on end leading up to a competition, and it worked. The only problem with that is it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't enjoyable, and I was relying on grit and willpower. And the only thing that kept me on track with that extreme approach of 6 days a week in the gym, 2 hours of cardio a day on top of the weight training, while doing so running on boiled chicken and broccoli, the only thing that kept me going was knowing that as soon as this contest is over, I'm going to go back to my old habits. I'm going to eat whatever the hell I want, and I'll be back to normal again. So I could put on the blinders and muster up extreme levels of willpower and discipline and grit for the short term. But I knew this wasn't a long-term solution. So I went into that diet knowing that, hey, I'm just going to suffer it out for the short term. But as soon as this contest is over, I'm going to eat whatever the heck I want, hit up the all-you-can-eat buffet, the pizza place, the bakery, the ice cream shop, all the whole shebang. What would end up happening? Months of dieting to lose all that weight, only a few weeks of binge eating afterwards to gain it all back. Then I'd be back to square one, fatter than ever, and I try and justify it and explain why I was gaining all this weight by telling people that I'm bulking up now because it's the off season. And I did that year after year after year as a competitive bodybuilder, like literally from 1995 right up until 2011. I went through that yo-yo diet cycle, and I was doing it on purpose, right? It's not like a lot of people who unconsciously yo-yo diet. Like I was purposely doing it, which makes it even more stupid and ridiculous because I would purposely go on that crazy cut and then know damn well as soon as this contest cutting diet is over and the contest is over, I'm going to start binge eating. And I did that year after year after year. And the only thing that kept me on track was knowing that, okay, I'm going to diet down for next year's competition. So I would always keep my weight somewhat in check because it would never get too far out of control before I'd be dieting down again for the next contest. But once I stopped competing, I never had that check and balance. So every year my weight started to climb up a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And then finally got to the point where like, oh, who's this fat guy looking back at me in the mirror? Even though I knew differently and I knew what to do to lose the weight, I wasn't doing what I know I should have been doing. And in my mind, I was making the task of losing body fat too big because in my mind, in order to get ripped, in order to get lean, I had to do 6 days a week in the gym. I had to do 2 hours of cardio a day. I had to eat nothing but boiled chicken and broccoli, and I had to suffer it out for months on end. And as a new father, my priorities got pushed down the ranking. If you're a parent yourself, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're not sleeping well, waking up in the middle of the night to a crying baby, bottle feeding and diaper changing, and just waking up exhausted from a poor night's sleep. And if you're physically exhausted, you don't feel like going to the gym. So it's so easy to say, I'm tired, I'll work out tomorrow. And then tomorrow rolls around, I'll start again on Monday. And it just kept, getting pushed off and pushed off. And the same when it came to meal prep. I'm too tired to prep. I'll order something like, hey, we'll order takeout or something like that, or we'll get something through the drive-through. I know I shouldn't be eating this. I know it's not a good choice, but hey, just one last hurrah. I'll start again tomorrow, or I'll start again on Monday. And all these little decisions just started to compound, right? And I'm getting fatter and fatter. I know I'm getting fatter. I know I shouldn't do this, but at the same time, I don't want to start the dieting process because in my mind, I had made it too big. Again, 6 days a week in the gym, 2 hours of cardio, boiled chicken and broccoli. I was like, I don't want to do that. That's too hard. But the secret that allowed me to start again on my muscle after 40 transformation journey was I made the actions smaller. I mean, I didn't have time to go to the gym 2 hours a day, but there was a lot of times when, hey, maybe I got a half hour where I can go to the gym, or heck, I could do some exercises at home because we got a home gym down in our basement. So, okay, I don't have time to go and do a full 2-hour workout at the gym, but I can take 20 minutes or I can take 30 minutes and go down and do a little pump up with home gym down in the basement. Something's better than nothing. And when it came to the cardio, like I used to have it in my mind that I had to do at least an hour of cardio, or what's the point? Like that was what I used to do when I was competing in bodybuilding. I'd go for hour-long cardio sessions. And if I didn't have time to do an hour, then I said, well, what's the point? I'm not going to burn enough calories unless I go for at least an hour. But I never had that kind of time to spend, but there was a lot of opportunities throughout the day where, okay, I don't have an hour, but I got 10 minutes, I got 15 minutes, I got 20 minutes or something like that. I can take 20 minutes on my lunch break and go for a little walk around the block and get something, and something's better than nothing. So if you're procrastinating with getting started and you feel that hesitation because the task of getting in shape and losing weight and everything else is just too big, break it down into small action steps. I want you to make it so small that you can't say no. So for example, like you might say, well, I don't have an hour to go to the gym, but hey, could you put on your sneakers and go for a little 10-minute walk around the block? Chances are you could. And make it so small so that you can't even justify not doing it. You just do it, right? And for me, walking was one of the key things that I started with. Just put on my sneakers, go outside, walk up the street for 5 minutes, turn around and walk back. That was one of my action steps. And I made a point of doing that at least once a day. And the ironic thing is once you get that ball rolling, once you start in motion, it's so much easier to stay in motion. Like the hardest part is just getting started. The hardest part of going to the gym is walking through the front door. Like literally get your ass in the car, drive to the gym, and then walk through the front door. That is the hardest exercise anybody will ever do at the gym. I mean, I know people say, oh, deadlifts are hard and squats are hard and this is hard. No, the hardest exercise is walking through that front door. Because once you're in there, the rest is like coasting downhill. It's easy from there because you're at the gym. But getting there is the hardest part for most people. So just make a habit of getting started and make the task of working out so small. So instead of having this big grand, like, hey, I got to do a 2-hour workout or I got to do an hour-long cardio session or anything like that, make it tiny, make it baby steps, just baby chunks of time, something that you can do in 10 minutes or something that you can do in 20 minutes, just so small that there's no excuse to not get it done. And sure, it's not going to be some miraculous transformation. Like if you go and do a 10-minute workout today, you're not going to look any different tomorrow, right? If you work out today or you don't work out today, you're going to look the same tomorrow. And that applies with nutrition as well. Like if you eat healthy today or you eat like crap today, you're going to look the same tomorrow. But it's the compound effect. So if you continue to do little workouts day after day after day, eventually it's going to start to compound. Same with the nutrition. If you eat healthy day after day after day, eventually it's going to start to compound. And this is what you have to realize is we're looking for that compound effect over time, not getting hung up in the nitty-gritty details in the moment, right? So this is the big one. I want to really drive this one home. The biggest thing that's the cause of failure for fitness success or any success is not starting. And very often the root cause is because we're making it too big in our mind. So the number one tip to have for you, make that actions that you're struggling with, you're procrastinating with, make it smaller or find a smaller version that you can do to build that momentum and just start showing up. Build the habit of showing up. Once you're doing that, like once you're going to the gym on a regular basis, you can always elaborate and make your workouts more challenging, more demanding. It's easy to add volume and intensity once you're already going, but it's hard to get that momentum started. It's hard to get yourself into the routine of actually going. So that's the first step. And the second one on our list is not finishing. So you've got yourself started, right? You got the first step done. You're actually showing up to the gym. You're taking action. You're improving your eating habits. You're doing something, right? You got the momentum moving forward. But very often people don't follow through. They don't stick to it long enough to actually see the results that they are trying to achieve. One of the biggest reasons why people fail to achieve their goals is because they have unrealistic expectations. And a lot of this is pushed on us by the fitness industry itself. Whether it's supplement ads promising, hey, take our special drink, take our magic pill, and within 30 days, you're going to be shredded. Or programs that promise, hey, follow this plan and achieve this 90-day transformation or whatever. They're trying to push the quick fix solution. And that rarely happens. Chances are, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, it's probably going to take longer and it's probably going to take more work than you initially expect, right? I'm just saying that up front to prepare you. Now, sometimes being naive can actually serve you in the short term because if you think something's easy and achievable, you may start it because you're so naive, you don't know any different. But once you start the process, and you don't see the results happening as fast as you think they should be happening, very often people get frustrated and quit. And it's not because they're making no progress, but it's because they're making progress slower than they think they should. And I'll give you an example of this. Like sometimes I'm coaching people and they say, I've been dieting and exercising and I've been going to the gym and I haven't had a cheat meal for a whole month and I only lost 5 pounds. And they're starting to beat themselves up because I've been doing this for a whole month and I only lost 5 pounds. Instead of celebrating the fact that, hey, way to go. You've been going to the gym, you've been exercising, you've been eating right, and you lost 5 pounds. Like, woohoo, give yourself a pat on the back. Like, that is awesome progress. Keep going. They're looking at it as a massive failure, a massive setback, because they're like, oh, I figured I'd be ripped and have 6-pack abs by now, but I only lost 5 pounds. I don't look any different when I look at myself in the mirror. And the reality is getting in shape, losing body fat, achieving your fitness goals, very often, it's going to take longer than you expect. It's probably going to be harder than you expect. But if you stick with it and refuse to quit, the results are inevitable. The only thing standing between you and your goals is you quitting on yourself. I mean, that's the truth. Like if you start the journey and you get the help you need and you're following a proven action plan and you refuse to quit, I mean, your success is inevitable. Now, sure, there's going to be ups and downs and challenges and roadblocks and all kinds of crap in the way, right? It's never going to be smooth sailing. I'm going to tell you that up front, right? There's going to be challenges that you can't even anticipate yet. But if you refuse to quit and you just keep moving forward, eventually you're going to succeed. And a great example of this is in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I actually have a copy of that right here. If you've never read this one yet, I would highly recommend it. I've mentioned this before on past podcasts. And the thing I like about this book is it covers a lot of diet and exercise examples. But one of the things James talks about in that book is the idea of the plateau of latent potential. When you start working towards a goal, the effort you put in very often doesn't lead to linear progress, meaning like you don't put in a day's work and see a day's results. Very often you have to put in a lot of work up front with very little results in return. And it's almost like that hockey stick curve where you're putting in all this work, nothing. And then eventually at the end, once you put in weeks or months, or in some cases, maybe even years of work, then you start to see the fruits of your labor. It's not until much later when you actually start to see the results compounding and matching the effort you put in. And this derails a lot of people and kind of messes up their motivation because they think, hey, if I go to the gym today, if I eat healthy today, then I should be leaner and better shape tomorrow. But it doesn't work that way, right? There's a lag time between the effort you put in and the results you get. But the good news is if you know this up front and you're willing to put in that work in advance, the results that you get later on are going to be well worth it. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you start making progress even faster than you anticipate. This is crazy because I'm not working out as hard. I'm not even eating as strict as I was before, but I'm still making progress. Like that can actually happen. And I'm sure if any of you who are advanced in bodybuilding and fitness, you probably notice that. Like sometimes you may, once you're on a roll with your training and your nutrition, and then you skip a workout and you think, oh God, this is going to ruin my roll, ruin my progress because I missed a workout. But then you actually go to the gym the following day after that, and you probably even feel stronger. You're probably more rested, more recovered, and it actually helps. Same thing, like sometimes you might cheat on your diet, think, oh God, I blew it. This is going to ruin everything. And you feel great the next day. Like maybe you even go to the gym and you have a really good workout because you got those extra carbs and extra glycogen in your system. Sometimes that can actually help to spike your metabolism. And ironically, I've even seen it happen where sometimes, once people have a system in place and they're consistent, the occasional cheat meal or refeed meal can actually help to spike your metabolism and aid with the process versus setting you back. It's not always linear, meaning like, hey, I eat clean today and I exercise today and I get in shape tomorrow. It doesn't happen like that. You have to put a lot of work in up front, and then eventually later on down the road is when you're going to see the results, the fruits of your labor. And you can kind of visualize it like planting a garden. I can tend to the soil, I can plant the seeds, I can water them, I can make sure they get enough sunlight, and I can do all that stuff, but I can't force the plants out of the ground. right? It's not like Jack and the Beanstalk where you throw the magic beans in the ground and then tomorrow you got a beanstalk to the sky. It doesn't happen like that. You plant your seeds today and you look out tomorrow, nothing, right? You water them, you make sure they get lots of sunlight, and you go back the next day, nothing. And it's going to be like that, nothing. And then eventually you're going to get a little tiny sprout. And you're going to like, well, big freaking deal, a little sprout. I'm expecting to have a friggin' vegetable garden here. Like, how am I going to feed a family off this little tiny measly sprout? Like, this sucks. What am I wasting my time for? But if you keep nurturing those little sprouts and tending to them, make sure that they're getting water and sunlight and everything is taken care of, eventually they're going to grow into full-grown plants and they're going to produce harvest. You get your vegetable plants or your whatever you're growing, right? Like we grew a vegetable garden this summer and we grew lettuce and onions and carrots and tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, we had a nice little harvest, but it took all summer for something to manifest. I mean, it took weeks upon weeks before you got anything out of it. I mean, in the initial phases, it's like watching grass grow, literally, or watching vegetables grow in this case. But the process is very slow initially. Even though you put in all that work, there's nothing to show for the results, nothing to show for your efforts, I should say. But eventually, if you can stick with it, you will get the fruits of your labor, right? So it's very similar to planting a garden in that way. You have to think of you're putting in a lot of work up front for the reward later on. And this is where a lot of people screw up and they don't succeed and they don't finish, is because they feel like a failure even though they're succeeding slowly. I'm going to say that again. A lot of times people feel like a failure because they're succeeding so slowly, and then they end up quitting when they're actually progressing. I mean, the analogy I used at the start, like someone lost 5 pounds and then they feel like a failure because I only lost 5 pounds. I actually shared this on the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Facebook group. I was tracking my progress because back in November, I set a goal for myself saying that I wanted to lose 10 pounds by Christmas. And I made a video and I shared my before pictures and stuff, and I was tracking my progress. And I did a follow-up video the day after Christmas. I did a follow-up video, and I had failed in achieving my 10-pound weight loss goal. I only lost 8 pounds from the end of November. I think it was November 26th or something like that, until December 26th. So in that month, I had lost 8 pounds instead of the 10 pounds that I had set as a goal for myself. Now, most people would go through that and probably beat themselves up saying, oh, I set a goal to lose 10 pounds. I didn't lose 10 pounds. I'm a failure. I'm an F up, right? Why even bother? But we want to look at the bigger picture. I still achieved a massive goal. I'm 8 pounds lighter than I would have been if I hadn't have focused on that, if I hadn't have set that goal. In fact, if I did what most people do over the holidays, I'd probably be 8 pounds heavier versus 8 pounds lighter. So we have to look at things like, I always see in the glass as half full, not half empty, looking at the bright side. And the cool thing about this is, like, if you don't hit your goal by the certain deadline, don't abandon the goal. Just change the criteria. Like maybe you were too ambitious and you didn't give yourself enough time to achieve that goal, or you didn't realize how much time it would take, and you just need to give yourself longer, right? So be flexible. But the big one, if you commit, make sure to see it through. Like, refuse to quit. That is the number one thing. If I can drive anything home, refuse to quit on yourself. Your success is inevitable as long as you start and you refuse to quit. And the third reason why people fail to achieve their fitness and fat loss goals is due to poor environment. And what I mean by this is the people you're around, your friends, your family, your social circle, if you will, because that can have a huge impact in the results that you achieve. If you've studied personal development, you're maybe familiar with Jim Rohn. He's one of the old school personal development gurus from back in the day. Jim Rohn was one of Anthony Robbins' mentors. To kind of put things in perspective. I mean, by today's standards, Anthony Robbins is old school, but Jim Rohn was around to help mentor Anthony Robbins when he was just a young guy starting out. So, he's one of the original old school personal development gurus. And Jim had a saying that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you look at any aspect, for example, like you take the average income of the 5 people you spend the most time with, chances are that's probably your average income. If you take the average weight of the 5 people you spend the most time with, that's probably your average weight. If you take the average hobbies of the 5 people you spend the most time with, that's probably your average hobbies. Like people hang around like people. For example, musicians will hang around other musicians. Athletes will hang around other athletes. Computer nerds and gamers will hang around other computer nerds and video gamers. People hang around people who are like themselves. And this also carries over into our physical shape as well. So if your friends and family and everybody in your social circle that you associate with are overweight, there's a good likelihood that you're overweight as well. Vice versa, if you're hanging around athletes and people who are very health conscious and keeping things in check as far as their health and fitness and their weight, there's a good likelihood that that's going to rub off on you as well. And you're probably going to be very health conscious and keep things in check in terms of your health and your fitness and your weight. So like-minded people hang around like people. Now, one thing that we have to factor in as well is in today's world, we have an unfair advantage that wasn't around back when Jim Rohn made that statement, because he said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But in today's world, we just don't have physical time. We also have virtual time. Right now, you and I, through this podcast, are spending virtual time together. So even though I'm not physically there with you, I'm there with you virtually. And this is having an impact. I mean, my words are going into your ears and it's having an impact on and changing the way you think. And this can apply to you in the form of who you follow on social media, the videos you watch, the podcasts you listen to, the books you read. That kind of stuff has a massive impact. So this contributes to the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This should come as a bit of a relief, because maybe you don't have friends and family and coworkers who are into health and fitness and things like that, but you could surround yourself with people virtually. And the way of this podcast is one. Our Muscle After 40 Blueprint coaching program is another. This is where we get a group of like-minded guys, like men over 40 who want to improve their health and fitness. They come on board with the Muscle After 40 Blueprint. And we have our whole VIP community where we're there to help support and encourage one another and pull each other up to a higher level. And I find that the guys who participate in that program make exponentially better progress than people who don't. Right? So it's a proven system to get around people who can help pull you up to a higher level. And in fact, in the book Atomic Habits, James Clear has a quote as well. It says, if you want to build habits that last, join a group where the desired behavior is the normal behavior. And that's exactly what we do through the Muscle After 40 Blueprint program. Right? We have that desired behavior is the normal behavior within our community. You can see this in other areas as well. Like if you join a gym, right? I mean, that indirectly is helping to improve the people that you associate with, because statistically, people who go to the gym are in better shape than people who don't go to the gym. And this also applies in other areas. Like even if you're looking at Weight Watchers, for example, like people who attend Weight Watchers meeting are probably more conscious of their weight than people who don't attend Weight Watchers meetings or some similar type of program. I'm not necessarily promoting Weight Watchers, but I'm just using that as an example. Other things like Alcoholics Anonymous, like anyone who's trying to overcome addiction, going to an AA meeting and being around people who are there to help and support and pull you up to a higher level can certainly help versus trying to do it on your own. So these type of clubs and communities and groups and coaching programs, this can have a huge impact because it impacts your environment. And you want to surround yourself with people who are going to pull you up versus people who are going to pull you down. Like, you don't want to be the person who says, okay, I want to join the gym. I want to get in shape and, I want to get fit and start eating better. And then everybody says, oh, what the hell are you doing that for? Right? Come on, you only live once, right? I mean, going to the gym, that takes up too much time. It's too expensive. It's too hard. You're too old to do that. Don't be so foolish. Come over, sit on the couch and have a beer with me. Right? We'll have a beer and we'll order a pizza and we'll watch Netflix. Right? Don't screw that gym stuff. Don't be so foolish. I mean, and chances are people like that, right? You probably have people in your own life who would discourage you from trying to better yourself because they're like the crabs in the bucket. They want to pull you down. I mean, it's important to be a part of a community of people who have done what you want to do. So if you want to get in shape, get around other people who are similar to you and have gotten in shape. If you want to become a good musician, get around other people who've become good musicians. If you want to become a good writer, get around other people who have become good writers. Like, get around people who are doing what you want to do and can see the potential. Because very often we can't see the true potential for ourselves, especially if we haven't had past success before. But someone who's done it and has helped others do it can see the potential for you. And this is where having a good coach or a good teacher is helpful, because very often they can see the potential in you that you can't see in yourself. And I have this all the time, like with people who come on board with the Muscle After 40 program. Like we're reviewing their overall structure and situation. And I say, you know what? You have potential to get visible abdominal definition, or you have potential to achieve this level of athletic performance, or whatever. Like you have potential to do a bodybuilding competition. I actually had 2 of my coaching students just recently compete in bodybuilding competitions, and they weren't young men. Mike Brown did his very first bodybuilding competition at age 61. Another guy, Paul Miller, did his very first bodybuilding competition at age 70. So imagine getting on stage in your little, bodybuilding trunks, Speedos, and posing in front of an auditorium of people at the age of 60 plus, right? Like Mike was 61, Paul was 70. And I mean, holding their own, like actually coming home with medals as well. These guys, when they started their journey, they couldn't see that happening. But because they got around people who could see the potential in them, that enabled them to fulfill that potential. Because like they couldn't see it for themselves initially, but by getting around people who said, you know what, you do have the potential to do this. You can achieve that goal. You can become a competitive bodybuilder. Now, granted, they're not going to go off and win the Mr. Olympia or become a pro bodybuilder or anything like that, but they can compete on the local level and place respectably well in age category bodybuilding competitions. So like, in the masters category against other guys their own age, they can do very well and actually be competitive on that stage. And that's what this is all about. It's not trying to, blow smoke up your butt and say, oh, you're going to become the best in the world, or, the next pro bodybuilder or whatever. No, it's none of that stuff, but it's about pushing the boundaries for what's possible for you. And a lot of times we have these self-limiting beliefs that if you can get around people who are supportive and can pull you up to a higher level, you'll be able to fulfill your potential. Whereas if you try and do it on your own, or you don't have the tools, tactics, and strategies and the belief systems on your own, very often that's going to be unfulfilled potential, right? And it's such a sad thing when people go through life never realizing their full potential, especially the full potential of your body. I mean, even the great philosopher Socrates said, it's a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable. So we want to see our full potential when it comes to our physical development. I mean, that is just as important, if not more important, than achieving your full potential in terms of your education or your mental development or any other area. I mean, our physical body, this is what we live our life in. This is the vehicle that takes us through life. I mean, why do you want to be going through life in a body that's not able to support you? You want to go through life in a body that's strong and healthy and agile and fit and can do the things you want to do without limitations, without your body holding you back, right? I mean, that is so exciting, and it's such a liberating feeling when you can do that, versus having the other side of the coin where, oh, I can't do that because I'm too heavy, or I can't do that because I'm short of breath, or, I mean, we don't want to be in that situation. We want to be able to live our life to the fullest and do the things we want to do without our bodies holding us back. And the fourth mistake that people make that prevent them from achieving their goals is focusing on the pain and not the pleasure, right? Dreading the process, thinking of how much this is going to hurt, how much this is going to suck, how hard that exercise is going to be, how awful that diet's going to be, how irritable I'm going to feel when I'm hungry. Like they're focusing on all the negative aspects and not the pleasurable aspects. And the truth is, everything has both pain and pleasure, enjoyable and unenjoyable. Like there's a yin and a yang to everything. There's a day and a night. There's always polar opposites to everything. So you can focus on the negative, or you can focus on the pleasure. And most of us, like, we know what cake tastes like. We know what potato chips taste like. We know what pizza and ice cream and French fries and all that tastes like. But do you know what being fit tastes like? Or feels like, I should say, because it technically doesn't taste, but you know what I'm getting at. Do you know what having visible abdominal definition feels like? Do you know what being able to jump out of bed in the morning with spring in your step and energy to burn, and to go through the day feeling good about yourself to be able to go to the beach and take your shirt off and not be embarrassed, to be proud of yourself, to be proud of your body and feel confident in your own skin. Do you know what that feels like? That feels way the hell better than the temporary pleasure you get by drowning your sorrows in a tub of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. The short-term pleasure you get from being a pig and indulging in processed junk food is here and gone, and then you feel guilty and almost ashamed of yourself for doing it, versus the pleasure of being fit and the satisfaction you get of being fit and the energy and the things you're able to do and the confidence you feel. That's something that's so much more substantial and long term. We have to associate the pleasure and not always dwelling on the pain, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't like going hungry, or I don't like exercise, or I don't like the taste of vegetables. Like, well, do you like being fat? Do you like being riddled with disease? Do you like having diabetes? Do you like having high blood pressure? Do you like having all these health issues? The truth is, you're going to have to suffer some way, some shape, or some form. I mean, if you don't suffer now in terms of going to the gym and eating healthy foods and exercising some self-control, then you're going to pay the price later on in life when you're riddled with illness and disease. And I'm sure everyone watching this right now or listening to this knows of people in their own life who are suffering the consequences of poor health choices that they made earlier in life. Like, maybe they're suffering from obesity. Maybe they're suffering from diabetes. Maybe you know someone who's had to get their foot amputated because of diabetes, or had to get their leg amputated, or started to lose their eyesight, because of diabetes. I mean, diabetes is a scary freaking disease, and I didn't fully understand how scary it was until I actually had an uncle of mine go through that whole process. His body literally started to break down because of diabetes, and it started with his toes becoming discolored and rotten, and they literally had to amputate his toes. And then it became his foot. His foot started to get discolored and literally started to rot. The flesh started to rot. They had to amputate his foot and then amputate his leg. I mean, if that's not suffering, if that's not pain, what the frick is? You're telling me that it's too hard to go to the gym, or it's too hard to eat healthy, or it's too hard to eat vegetables, or I don't like this, or I don't like the taste of artificial sweeteners. I'd rather have the full sugary soda pop, or I don't like the taste of vegetables, so I'm going to eat cake instead. Okay, sure. Have your soda, have your cake, skip the workouts. But is having your legs amputated and going through life like that, I mean, is that a fair trade? We need to associate pain and pleasure to the right things, right? There are two very powerful motives, pain and pleasure. Right. So we need to associate them accordingly and do so in a way that's going to serve us, not a way that's going to set us back. Right. Because a lot of people, they're willing to indulge in that short-term pleasure for the long-term pain. Whereas if you reverse it, you put up with a little bit of short-term discomfort, a little bit of short-term pain, you can get the long-term pleasure. And if you can rewire your thinking to actually crave the short-term discomfort for the long-term pleasure, that is the secret to a successful life. This applies with everything. Like, the person who's willing to put in the work today for the reward tomorrow. Like, think of a student. And when you go to school, for example, you can procrastinate, say, you know what, I don't feel like studying. I don't feel like working on that term project. I don't feel like doing anything. Hey, I'm just going to hang out with my buddies. We're going to play video games. We're going to drink beer. We're going to go to the pub and hang out and chase girls. And we'll worry about schoolwork and study later. Okay, that's going to come back and bite you in the ass, especially when you flunk out of school. But what if you did the opposite and you prioritized the study, prioritized, working on that term project, prioritized all that stuff? Then later on, you have so much less stress over those things, and you get better grades, and it becomes easy. And that's the way life is in general. I mean, once you prioritize doing those short-term painful things in the moment for the long-term pleasurable things later on, that's the secret to an easy and successful and satisfying life, right? So that's what we really want to focus on, especially when it comes to fitness. And the good news is it doesn't have to be as painful or as dreadful as a lot of people make it out to be. Like, a lot of times people think in order to get in shape or lose weight that they have to suffer. Like, you got to go to the extremes with workouts, or you got to go to the extremes with calorie restriction. and you can only eat boring and bland foods, and you have to kill yourself in the gym, and on all this kind of stuff. And that's not true. I mean, sure, there are times when you can push yourself, be a bit more aggressive, but that's not sustainable long term. I mean, remember back to my bodybuilding competition days where I said I could exert extreme levels of discipline and willpower for the short term, put on the blinders, 6 days a week in the gym, 2 hours of cardio on top of the strength training, boiled chicken and broccoli. I mean, yeah, burning the candle at both ends. Sure, it works, but it's not sustainable long term, right? So what I had to do in order to achieve long-term sustainable results is find a way where I could dial it back, maybe not get as aggressive of results up front, but go at a more manageable pace where I could sustain the results long term, right? And it's almost like learning how to go through life on cruise control rather than going through life with the pedal to the metal. I mean, like, just visualize driving your car, for example. If you try and drive your car with 2 speeds, either foot flat to the floor on the gas pedal or foot flat to the floor on the brake pedal, you're not going to be able to drive very far, right? If you only have flat out or stop, right? You need to learn how to modulate those. You need to learn how to drive at a sustainable, manageable pace, right? That's why we have speed limits on the road. It's not just, hey, flat out, right? You drive at a speed limit according to the driving conditions. And if you can do that with your fitness and nutrition, like modulate it so that you're going at a sustainable pace based on the situation and circumstances, it becomes a lot more enjoyable and a lot more sustainable. You'll stay on the road longer, where if you try to go flat out, you're going to crash and burn. I mean, imagine trying to drive down your road and you only had 1 speed, foot flat to the floor on the gas pedal. I mean, you're not even going to be able to drive off your own street. I mean, you're going to crash before you even make it anywhere. You need to learn how to modulate things. And the same applies with fitness and nutrition, right? There's times when you can push it for a bit more aggressive, maybe push the workouts a little bit or amp up the diet a little bit. And there's other times when you need to learn how to scale it back and be a bit more conservative, like especially around the holidays, for example. I mentioned this in one of our last podcasts. Learn how to dial things back and enjoy those holiday meals with friends and family. But as soon as those holiday meals are over, then you can ramp it back up a little bit and get back on track, right? So knowing how to modulate things and being good enough, but good enough consistently, or another way of putting it, being consistently good versus occasionally great. This is the secret to long-term success, right? It's not this all or nothing extreme, suffer it out, balls to the wall approach. You have to learn how to modulate it. And this takes a lot of the dread and the fear out of fitness and nutrition, because once you realize that you don't have to suffer to get results, like you can actually enjoy the process. I mean, sure, there's going to be a little bit of self-control involved there. It's not like, hey, I can eat whatever the hell I want and do whatever the hell I want and get in shape. I mean, you still have to exert some self-control, but it's not the extreme levels. It's just moderate levels. And this brings me up to the 5th mistake that people make, and that is pushing themselves too hard, too soon, and burning themselves out in the process. And a saying that I like to use with my coaching students, especially when we're in the gym training, is we want to keep it below red line. For those of you who are into cars, you know exactly what I mean. I mean, if you're driving your car and you're racing it above red line, eventually you're going to blow the motor, right? We need to keep it below red line. And this applies to your workouts. So always have the mindset of leaving a little bit in reserve, never going and emptying the tank, or being very conservative when you do empty the tank. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place to empty the tank, but it's very sparingly. When you're in the gym training, and for 99% of your workouts, you should have reps in reserve. You should keep a little bit in reserve, not always pushing yourself to red line. And this is going to make it a lot more sustainable. And it's also going to help with injury prevention, because one thing that's going to derail your progress faster than anything is getting injured. I mean, like, if you could have the best planned out workout program, you could have the best meal plan laid out with all your calories and macros and meal timing, everything laid out to a T. But if you go in there and you push yourself too much too soon and you get injured, like let's just say you're bench pressing and you're lifting way too heavy, lifting beyond your means, and pop, there goes the rotator cuff, or you tear a pec, or you're doing heavy squats or deadlifts and you blow out your a disc in your lower back, or you pop out your patella tendons or something like that. If you get hurt, you get injured, you're not just bouncing back the next day. Like that is a major setback. So one of the key things that I'm always a huge advocate of is injury prevention. You want to stay injury free for as long as possible. Now, if you're a part of the fitness game for any length of time, chances are you are probably going to get a few niggles and aches and pains from time to time, but managing it and avoiding the big injuries is the key. And one of the ways to do that is keeping it below red line. So instead of always thinking of how hard can you push yourself, I want you to visualize things as a range. Like to give you an example of this, think of like your best ever effort. Like if you were absolutely perfect with your workouts or absolutely perfect with your nutrition, what would that be for you? Like if you were to put it on a scale, like let's say a percentage, maybe your absolute personal best is 95%. Right? I'm just using this as a number, an example. Let's say 95%, I'm spot on with my workouts, spot on with my nutrition, everything's going great, 95%. But that's hard to sustain, like that's damn near perfect. Like there's very little wiggle room for error. Now, what's the lowest amount that you can sustain and still make progress? I don't know, like maybe it's 70%. If you're at 70% intensity, 70% consistency, maybe that's enough to still make slow progress or minimize the damage, right? You can still move along, if you will. Well, how about instead of always trying to push that top line higher, so instead of trying to go from 95 to 100, how about we raise the bottom line? So instead of going at 70, we raise the bottom line to 80. So your new default mode now is 80% consistency, 80% effort, 80% versus going from like 50 to 70 or somewhere like that, where you're not really making any progress at all. And then the opposite, where you're always at 95 or trying to push to 100 and burning yourself out. How about we just raise the bottom line? Right now, again, this is kind of like a mindset visualization here, but stick with me here for a moment. If you raise your bottom line, like you raise your standards, it's easier to sustain that and it's easier to make progress, right? Versus always trying to excel and push yourself to the absolute limits. So raise the bottom line. And this is all a part about being good enough, but good enough consistently, or consistently good versus occasionally great. And it's amazing when you do that. Like if you're 80% consistent with your training or 80% consistent with your nutrition, you can still make progress, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. If you were going to go on an extreme cutting diet, like let's just say you wanted to lose weight as fast as possible, and you said, no, I'm going to go on an extreme cutting diet. I'm going to cut my carbs to zero. I'm going to slash my calories. I'm just going to eat one meal a day. I'm going to keep my calories under 1,000 a day. And I'm going to, do 2 hours of cardio, 6 days a week in the gym. And I'm just going to try and force myself to lose weight as fast as possible. Now, that's what a lot of people are going to try and do over the course of January. And they're going to probably fail before February even rolls around. But this is the way a lot of people approach fitness and nutrition. It's like nothing, no gym, no diet, no exercise, no diddly squat. And then when they finally do muster up the motivation to start, it's like, okay, I got to dive headfirst into the deep end, sink or swim. So 0 carb, 1,000 calorie a day diet, 2 hours a day in the gym, burn the candle at both ends. Let's go. And the extreme ends of that, like either I'm doing frig all or I'm going flat out. It's too big of a jump, too big of a hurdle. And of course, it's not sustainable. I mean, anybody who tries to go on 1,000 calorie a day diet and work out like a madman, they know going into it that it's not sustainable. Like they know it's only a short-term thing. And the problem with that is if you're approaching it with a short-term mentality, you're only going to get short-term results. Like in order for this to be a sustainable long-term change, it has to be sustainable as a lifestyle. And this is where we need to change our approach. And instead of always trying to push it to the extreme, how can we just raise the bottom line, right? That's where I want you to think of. Instead of thinking, okay, I got to go keep my calories under 1,000 calories a day in order to lose weight. How about you just do the opposite? And instead of that, say, what if I just created 100 calorie a day deficit? So to put some numbers out there, let's say your normal daily eating is 3,000 calories a day. And instead of saying, well, I got to lose weight as fast as possible, I'm going to 1,000 calories a day, which is a massive 2,000 calorie a day deficit, totally unsustainable. What if you just said, instead of 3,000 a day, I'm just going to go to 2,900 a day, or maybe 2,800 a day, something really small, like 1 to 200 calorie a day deficit. That doesn't sound like much. And quite honestly, if you're used to eating 3,000 calories a day, if you just cut back to 29 or 2,800 calories a day, it's such a small difference that you'd hardly even notice it. Like, it's a few extra bites of food at each meal, or maybe just skipping a portion of dessert or something like that, or swapping out a regular soda for a diet soda. Something simple like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be this big, massive overhaul or this big, massive change. Just a few simple tweaks. Like, for example, swapping out a baked potato instead of the French fries could create that couple hundred calorie a day deficit. Simple things. Swapping out a grilled chicken breast instead of a deep fried chicken breast. Having a lean cut of meat instead of a fatty cut of meat. Like, sometimes the simple things like that could make a difference and create these little tiny deficits. But if you had a 200 calorie a day deficit, like, you hardly would even notice it. And it certainly wouldn't be something that's unbearable or causing you like, oh my God, this is terrible. I can't stand it. I feel so hungry and irritable and hangry. No, I mean, you'd hardly even notice it. But if you could sustain that over the course of a month, you'd probably drop a pound of body fat or more. Over the course of a year, you drop, say, 12 pounds of body fat. 12 pounds of body fat over the course of a year doesn't sound like much. And I'll be honest, that's not a very aggressive fat loss. It's a very modest one. But it's something that can be done without a lot of discomfort, without a lot of torture. It's just basically raising the bottom line a little bit. So we're not causing more damage. We're actually creating slow progress. But that is sustainable. And this is exactly the way people gain weight. Like, when you ignore your health and fitness and you don't follow a structured eating plan, like, do you just balloon up and gain weight like crazy? Like, do you gain 30 pounds in 30 days when you don't focus on your diet? Of course not, right? I mean, it creeps up on you slowly. You probably gain 5 or 10 pounds a year. And it's like, oh, it's crept up on me slowly, but it's no big deal. I can always lose it. And then 10 years go by. Next thing you know, you're 50 or 100 pounds overweight. And then you're like, okay, now I got a problem, right? Because it crept up on you slowly, year after year, decade after decade, before all of a sudden now you got a serious weight issue on your hands. It crept up slowly, but because you consistently let it creep up, it accumulated, and now you have something on your hands. You got an issue, and now we got a problem to deal with. What if we did the opposite? What if we created a very slight calorie deficit and just sustained that over time? You would gradually whittle away that body fat, but you would do so without causing a lot of pain or discomfort. Now, there are ways to accelerate the process. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying everybody has to lose weight that kind of slow rate, but this is how you can achieve sustainable long-term results. And with our Muscle After 40 program, for example, this is one of the phases that we go through, is where we teach people how to first stop gaining weight in the first place. Like, we go through a metabolic reboot where we just reset the metabolism, refocus on optimizing the nutrition, and prevent people from getting fat in the first place. Let's stop causing more damage. Like, let's learn to sustain or maintain where you're currently at. And then we can focus on reversing it, making progress. And then once you've achieved your desired level of fitness, your desired level of fat loss, then we can switch gears and focusing on maintaining it while still enjoying the process, and not this extreme crazy crash diet or no diet at all, like this all or nothing approach that so many people go through. We want to focus on how do we learn to enjoy the process so that you're good enough, but good enough consistently. And if that's your bottom line, and that's as low as you let yourself go, like slow progress moving forward, this is sustainable long term. And quite honestly, this was the secret for me achieving my Muscle After 40 transformation. I mean, I went through the whole process with that in mind, because I had went through competitive bodybuilding cutting diets for years. Like, I went through it for 15 years as a competitive bodybuilder. I went through the extreme cutting diet year after year after year. And I knew I didn't want to go through that. I said, I want to have a system where I can lose the weight, enjoy the process, and have it set up so that the weight that I lose is the weight that I keep off. The progress I make is the progress I keep, without feeling like I'm going through the extremes of cutting diets and feeling hangry and irritable and suffering in the process. And that was one of the key things that I focused on, was just creating a small enough calorie deficit through better choices that I hardly even noticed it. It was just a little tiny bit of discomfort, but not some glaring, I'm starving, I'm feeling hangry or irritable. It was just in those moments where, like, I feel like I could go back for second helpings, but I'm good. Or, I think I'm going to have a snack. I'll grab something from the vending machine, or I'm going to grab a little something here, or I'm going to have a munchie in front of the TV while I'm watching a movie. It's like, I'm good. I'll wait till my next meal, right? Just exerting that little tiny bit of self-control, those little in the moment decisions. And by doing that, it raised my bottom line to the point where I was making slow progress and actually losing body fat versus slow weight gain and actually gaining body fat, which is what I was stuck in before, where I'd give in to those little in the moment temptations. And it was only a little bit here, a little bit there, but it started to accumulate. And then before you know it, you got a belly that sticks out further than your chest, and you're looking in the mirror and saying, like, who's the fat guy looking back at me? Whereas if you just raise the bottom line and have that as your new benchmark, so you're now making slow progress versus slow fat gain, now you're enjoying the process and you're getting better over time without feeling like you're suffering it out. Sure, it's a slower way of going about it, but it's a sustainable way where over time, as the years go by, you're actually getting better. And we want to think bigger when it comes to fitness and nutrition and your long-term health and fitness goals. Instead of thinking like, where do I want to be in the next 30 days or in the next 12 weeks or all these little short-term goals like most people have, where do you want to be this time next year? Where do you want to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years from now? Like, think bigger, think much, much bigger. Like, I don't want you to be here at the end of 2025, rolling into 2026. Instead of achieving your fat loss goals and getting the physique that you want, now you're 5 or 10 pounds heavier and saying like, oh, I effed up again, right? And then I've got to start another diet and everything. Like, I don't even want you to think of starting diets. I just want you to raise that bottom line so that your day-to-day actions, just the way you live your normal life, is causing you to move forward and make progress versus causing you to slowly get fatter and deteriorate with age. We want to get better with age. We want to be like a fine wine. Right? We want to be getting better with age, not deteriorating with age. And this is something that my coaching students have done. Year after year after year, they're getting better, they're getting leaner, they're seeing progress, and they're enjoying the process. And that is so cool. That's what I want for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast. And if you did, please hit the thumbs up button, give it a like, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. And if you would like some more information about joining the Muscle After 40 Blueprint VIP coaching program, then I have a free PDF download that you can check out that explains the program in detail, what it is, how it works, what's included, all the different program options that we have. If you would like to get a copy of that, then down in the show notes below, I have a link where you can download a free PDF of the Muscle After 40 Blueprint that outlines the entire system for you. And if you have any questions or you'd like to get in touch with me, my email is down there as well, and you can reach out and contact me through email, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you that way. So we're going to clue it up for today, and we'll be back again next week with another episode of the Total Fitness Bodybuilding Podcast. Have yourself a great day, and I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. Take care. Over and out.